this conversation about Israel has blown up. It's gotten out of their control. Everyone's getting red-pilled. They want to control the conversation. And I think that Dave Smith is somebody that, because he's Jewish, because he's libertarian, they have selected him as a convenient spokesperson for it, because he doesn't really have a problem with Jews and their Jewishness. He doesn't really talk about the whole fifth column aspect of it. He talks about a very narrow aspect of it, which is there's this Israel lobby and they're sort of influential and they're driving us to war. That's one small selection of it.
So you think, just to clarify, you think he's like a psychological operation?
Yeah, effectively, yes.
Okay.
And I don't think he's doing that knowingly, but I think that they're creating the bounds of the debate by having him be the spokesperson, because
who is choosing him as a spokesperson? I mean,
Joe Rogan,
I could not disagree with that more. I just want to say that I patently disagree with you on this one. This is crazy. I think that he has moved the ball forward so much for, first and foremost, a lot of American Jews to have the courage to even question Israel, because in the same way that we were kind of brought up in the classroom with the, I guess you want to call it, emotional engineering around the Holocaust, learning about the Holocaust as like the biggest, most evil event that ever happened. Imagine if you're Jewish and you learn about that. It's the same way that Black Americans in the classrooms learn about slavery. So I understood the trigger emotional response that Black Americans had during BLM, because there was so much conditioning that happened in the classroom that makes them think that when someone says white supremacy is back, you have to riot. And I will extend that same understanding. I disagree with it, but I understand that when October 7th happens, it's almost like a childhood trauma for these people. Right. You learn this, your whole existence, it's existential crisis for you that something happened in Israel. And then you add in the fact that the ADL is sponsoring these trips to kind of make sure that they stay into this, this is who you are. And if somebody questions this, like we could end up in the Holocaust again. You have to have some sort of an understanding, even if they're wrong,
right?
You have to give them a little bit of time, a little bit of grace here. And so for him to be doing what he's doing and to be enduring a lot of the same stuff that I'm enduring, like he is on lists, he is being attacked by every single all people that are attacking me are certainly attacking Dave Smith. And your excuse is that he just is born Ashkenazi.
No, that's not my.
All right. So for those that don't know who this is Nick Fuentes. He's pretty much banned on YouTube. He's pretty much banned everywhere but X. Some of his views are definitely left field. In my opinion, he's definitely racist. He calls it racialist, but yeah, he's pretty racist. I don't know all of his opinions, but pretty sure he's anti-Semitic too. But Candace Owens does an interview with him, and I found his views on Israel specifically very interesting, and I thought I'd share it with you. This interview is getting shadow banned all over YouTube. You can't really find it. So I hope when I react to it, YouTube doesn't ban it, hopefully. And I hope you enjoyed this. If you do, make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel. Honestly, that's the way you can show your appreciation. It really helps out the channel, and it's really easy on your end. Just press the like button. It takes a second. Now let's continue.
Excuse. My problem.
And he's married to a Catholic, by the way. So that that's the part that I am even more confused about, because you said like he's a religious Jew. No, he's not. He's married to a Catholic.
What I mean by that is my criticism of Jews comes from a religious place. As a Catholic, we recognize that the Pharisees put Jesus on the cross, and the Talmudic Jews are the descendants of the Pharisees. And we also recognize...
And he is not a Talmudist. So that's what I want to say.
But that's
he's
what I'm
not
saying.
Any of those things. He's married to a Catholic. He's just born Ashkenazi.
But
so when I hear you say, Dave Smith, Jew, I think it conflicts with your point about how even white people, like you're just kind of trained that you should just like, there's something wrong with you for being born white. No one should feel guilty about how they're born.
Look, it's...
like, you know what I mean?
To sum it up succinctly, it's tokenism is what it is. It's a form of saying... we're criticizing the Jews in Israel. How do we soften and dampen the blow? Because we're going to get called anti-Semites if we bring on a guy criticizing Israel. I know we'll bring on a Jewish person, because then we get to say, I'm not an anti-Semite. Here's a Jewish person saying this.
Now, that would be true, the whole tokenism thing, if Dave Smith was politically correct. Dave Smith isn't. I love Dave Smith. He goes hard on Israel. He's one of the most vocal speakers against Israel and for the Palestinian people. And so I love the guy. I mean, I think he's really helping out the movement. And I think it's foolish to say that he's fake, right? Or that he's bought out or something, or just because he's born Jewish. I mean, I respect him for that, for being born Jewish and still seeing right and wrong, right? Like Israel's obviously wrong here. So Nick Fuentes, I think his take is just purely religious. I'm not sure.
Here's the
But
reason.
that's not why I had Dave Smith on. Actually,
Okay.
I had him on my podcast before I even left the Daily Wire. We had a 3-hour conversation about talking about war, and truly, because I think it's important for you to hear this. I think sometimes you internet too hard. The way that Dave Smith came onto our podcast on Daily
Internet too hard. That's a good one, and I think she's right.
Wire, he wasn't even on my radar. Skylar, who you just met, the producer, was a massive Dave Smith fan for years. And just kind of like what the libertarian debate was that was being had. He's like, you got to check out this guy, Dave Smith. And I was like, cool, book him. Let's get him on the show. And it was my favorite podcast that I did at Daily Wire. So I just liked him.
Okay.
That's it. There was no incentive of like, well, let me get this guy on again. I was like, can we create the magic of what we spoke about war? Because I'm kind of falling, I guess, down the rabbit hole and learning a lot. And he had a lot of information I didn't know.
Yeah.
And that was it. So there was nothing behind it. So when I hear you say it, I'm like, okay, are you interneting too hard? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A little bit. Do you think that you can kind of believe your own ideas? And look, we're all guilty of that.
No, and look, I mean, I'm going to stand by my point here, which is that me and Dave Smith are not ideologically on the same page, and will never be, because I am a Catholic and he is Jewish. Because he is Jewish, he still has affinity with Jewish people. And so my end game is to say, look, Tom.
So I don't get what Nick's is saying then. Is he kind of saying that he does not like Jewish people? That's not a good look, bro.
Thomas Aquinas said that Jewish people should be basically enserfed to the Catholic Church. I don't believe that. But the idea that we have Jewish people in America that are billionaires, that are running all the major media conglomerates, that are influencing the government, and they take advantage of the dual citizenship, it literally cannot be allowed.
I totally agree with the dual citizenship thing. There is no reason for these super rich politicians having dual citizenship. Like, politicians coming in wearing an IDF uniform. This is it's like almost treason. How's that okay?
By definition, systematically or systemically, this creates problems. And so when I go on my show, I'm saying we can't have Jewish people in government. Like, we can't have them having billions of dollars. This is a problem. It's like a national security problem because they are a fifth column. And as evidenced by recent developments, they're not loyal to America. Now,
I agree with you. And that's why I want to add this. I agree with you on the point that there is this operating fifth column of Zionism.
No.
Okay? No, but I want to be clear. And I'll tell you, this is where we disagree.
All right.
Because I think it's ridiculous to say to someone who's literally just born, he's like, I'm Ashkenazi, that is just his DNA, who is married to a Catholic, so you cannot call him a religious Jew. He is not a Zionist. He hasn't even been to Israel. So how do you just condemn him? And then also, how is that not toxic to what you're trying to do? So if you're saying that your entire platform is, I want to awaken people to this fifth column. Well, if I'm a Jewish person, okay, and I'm being raised and maybe I'm worried about Israel because I kind of grew up and was told that I have to care about this because of the Holocaust, whatever it is. And I see this guy who's just going, Jew, guilty, you're a Jew, doesn't matter, DNA, like you're 23andMe up there, Jew, guilty, okay? And you think that your ideas are going to grow with that perspective?
Well, they are. So that's happening. But
is that because of thanks to you or thanks to Dave? I
think it's thanks to me. But if you're asking me, I will answer. If you're lecturing me, I'll take the lecture.
I genuinely want to. I'm asking you the question sincerely. You think it's growing because of you and not because of people like Dave who are going, okay, like
this guy Nick Fuentes. He looks old and young at the same time. You really can.
Yeah, you can also think like this. It's okay to have this perspective. Like, you think it's because they're watching your show and they're going, he's got it right.
Let me give you a direct answer about the first part about Dave Smith. Just because he's born Jewish. What did he say when he went on Joe Rogan and he debated, what's the guy's name? He debated the British guy,
Douglas Murray.
Douglas Murray. When he debated Douglas Murray said, and you hear this is the woke right phenomenon, which Dave has criticized, but Douglas said, there is this dark element that is growing on the right. They're Holocaust deniers. They hate Jews. If they slip on a banana peel, they blame a Jew and all the rest of it. Dave Smith said, I agree with you. Those people are a problem. I'm against Holocaust denial and all this sort of stuff. Joe Rogan went on the attack against Jake Shields, who's a friend of mine and a fighter and a boxer. And you see this over and over and over again with people like Dave Smith and even someone like Daryl Cooper, who's not Jewish. And I talked to Daryl recently and we kind of made amends, but Daryl Cooper put out an article on a Substack saying the same thing. He said, I started talking about the Jews. I opened up this can of worms. Now that's all people want to hear about. He said, so I'm done talking about it because, there's people that can't handle it and they're taking it too far. And when I hear that from Daryl Cooper, when I hear that from Dave Smith, when they say Israel's our satellite, our aircraft carrier, I say something's not right here. There's clearly a subtle difference here. And that has a lot to do with, maybe Daryl Cooper not being a complete radical. And I think that has a lot to do with Dave Smith being Jewish, because he says that his ancestors died in the Holocaust. Now, I don't think that he'll ever be able to say in the way that I can, that maybe the Holocaust wasn't legitimate, or, maybe there's more to the story on World War II because it's his grandparents.
Okay, but
he says my ancestors went up the smokestacks at Auschwitz. And someone like me, I say, I don't care about Auschwitz. I don't care about the Holocaust. I'm done hearing about it. I have no affinity with that.
Right. But you also mentioned Daryl Cooper and you also mentioned Joe Rogan. These two people are not Jewish, right?
Right.
So are you saying that they're all condemned? Like, why does it matter? If Dave Smith, maybe he believes that, maybe he's wrong, maybe he believes it, who knows? If Joe Rogan says that, maybe he's wrong, maybe he believes it. Let's say we don't know. Daryl Cooper, what is the difference between these three individuals? Like, why is one represent a problem for you versus like your idea, going back to what you said, right? Let's tackle the idea. Let's actually debate the idea. So do you not see how you run into conflict with yourself? You're like, well, here's my story. I just wanted to debate the idea. And then when it comes to Dave Smith, rather than saying, I disagree with what you just said about whatever topic, saying that there is this strand, let's actually have the debate because the better idea will win. That's how my brain works.
Yeah, well, here's why. Because this is another form of gatekeeping.
I get what Candace is saying. Basically, there is a fraction, and there always will be an extremist fraction that is anti-Semitic, and they just hate people of the Jewish faith just because. And if Nick Fuentes is trying to stick up for those people, I don't think that's okay. And I think he's saying that, why aren't they going far enough, or why aren't they radical? I just don't agree with that.
And Joe Rogan says, okay, you're cool. Dave Smith is cool. But Jake Shields, he's a Holocaust denier. That's not cool. That's dark and evil and real anti-Semitism. You hear that all the time. They say, are you like a Dave Smith guy, or are you a real anti-Semite? Because
10 years ago, Dave Smith would be anti-Semitic as well. Opinions are changing.
You know what they say? If you're a real anti-Semite, you're out of the club. You don't get invited on the show. Piers Morgan won't have me on the show. He banned me. Tim Pool banned me. Joe Rogan banned me. And it's like, wait a second. So, clearly some people are able to go on these shows and express some form of the view, which is, again, like what you're saying, there's this Israel lobby. But if you go out and say, you know what, 6 million, I'm not buying it. I think this is a political narrative. I think it's atrocity propaganda serving a fifth column. Suddenly they say, well, that's real anti-Semitism.
The fact that Piers Morgan had Kanye West but not Nick Fuentes, I think that's hypocritical.
We want nothing to do with that. You remain outside. And so, and look, it's not to me about, people then say, oh, well, you're envious. Look, I love doing my show. I love doing what I do. I want the real truth to prevail. And there's this concept of a limited hangout. This is a CIA tool, and I'm sure you've heard of it, but for your audience that maybe hasn't, when they believe that disclosure is inevitable, a secret, a taboo, hidden narrative that they don't want to get out, when it's inevitable that it is going to go out, what they will do is they will leak out some of the truth. The public is so enamored with the new information, they go no further, and they actually don't get to the critical details. And I think that, we're basically at that point with the Israel lobby and the Jewish topic. Clearly something is going on.
So you're just distrusting, and that's fine to say that you're distrusting.
No, well, I'm distrusting naturally.
I think it's fine to, and you are correct, by the way, that there are these operations where they do these limited hangouts, and I'm very aware of that. That is true. And sometimes I have that in my mind when I'm watching something. I'm like, this feels like a limited hangout. Like they're not really kind of getting to the nucleus of the conversation. But I just really disagree with you about like just Dave is just guilty and condemned simply because he's born Ashkenazi.
I didn't say because he's Jewish.
Well, on the clip, I think you just went like Dave Jew, and it's like, what does it matter? Joe Rogan not Jew.
I'm sick of the tokenism.
Okay, and I'll tell you another reason why I disagree with that. And we can move on from Dave Smith because I like him, and I'm whoever I like. I don't really care. To adapt my opinions on the basis of yours, but I also just in general feel like I was that person for BLM. And I'm genuine. I was totally genuine. And that was kind of my wake up call. BLM, I didn't really accept the victim narrative, maybe a little bit like you, naive, walked into it like, oh, I'm just not going to support this thing. And I don't really want to be a Democrat. And then I dealt with the full weight of an attempted cancellation by the left at first. And kind of like she's, the token for the right. And people saying, well, they're only platforming her because she's a black person that agrees. And to some degree, maybe that's true. Like, obviously, like there is an element of tokenism, but I'm saying what I believe.
Sure.
I was saying what I believe.
And I don't doubt his sincerity. I don't doubt his sincerity at all.
So why problematize it? That's what I'm trying to get to. So it's then he's out there having to fight amongst these pro-Israel people. He's fighting the same Zionists that we are on the topic of Israel. And on top of that, he's got to deal with Nick Fuentes talking trash about him because he's like, well, this is just, who cares? If he can't help who he is. I couldn't help but I was black and disagreed with BLM. I'm just black and disagree with BLM,
Well, here's the reason why.
What I notice here is that you'll find people like this often where there's a movement, right? There's an anti-Israel movement going on. And Nick Fuentes is definitely more on the extreme side. And instead of appreciating the people that somewhat helped the movement, like Dave Smith, right? Dave Smith might not be as radical as Nick Fuentes, but he helps the movement. Nick Fuentes actually goes and criticizes people that aren't as extreme as him. And I don't think that's helpful. I think take whatever help you get, man, especially when you're the minority.
It's a little bit irritating because Dave Smith, for all the flack that he's getting, he remains on YouTube. He's been on YouTube the whole time. He remains on Twitter. He's been on Twitter the whole time. He has bank accounts. He has payment processors. And now that people are waking up about Israel, they want to invite a Jewish person on to tell us we're not real anti-Semites, we're not Holocaust deniers, but maybe something's wrong with Israel. And here I am, having been banned on YouTube, been banned by banks, every streaming platform, all of it condemned, life destroyed, and people still are gatekeeping me and saying, you're a real anti-Semite. And I'm saying, well, obviously we didn't come far enough. So I don't doubt his sincerity. He's a big boy. He doesn't mind that I'm trash talking him. And I still consider him a friend, even though I've been critical of him. But we have to go a little bit further than to say something's up with the Zionists or Israel. It's not Israel. It is the Jews. And I think that Dave Smith, being a Jewish libertarian, I don't think he's ready to go that far. I don't think he is.
I want to know what you mean by that. So just so we're clear, is your perspective that if people don't platform you, it's because they don't want to go too far?
It may be that they aren't that far ideologically, but then that's my job to push them farther. And that's why I say it. That's why I say,
maybe they just disagree with you. But that's another thing. Maybe they just disagree with you.
But I'm gatekept.
Okay, but if the more important, so for me, if I care deeply about what's happening to the Palestinians, obviously, I've made a point to talk about that. And I very much see what you're speaking about, that there is this coordinated, very sinister movement. I think it operates on the left and the right, whether it's the ADL or AIPAC. The money is flowing to instantly cancel people, to get them fired, and it's vicious. I mean, it is dirty business, and to survive it's hard for most people to even survive it.
Yeah, I think Candace Owens' channel was just deleted over a week at one point. And this is after she left the Daily Wire. So for her to come back from that, man, that's impressive.
They go through it because they're so smeared. It's like an effective tar and feathering. And for it to happen when you were 18 is ridiculous. But at the same time, if I'm going to use my platform to speak about that, I want to make sure that I'm hosting people that can explain that to people that otherwise may not even be aware of that.
Right.
So if you're going to host, why are you sitting this person down on your show? Well, because we're having a conversation about something that's important. I can either learn from that person, right? Or I think that this person can teach something to my audience, right? If I were to host you, and that was the clip that's coming out, do you think people are going to go, yeah, that just made me realize here I am just believing that we should, I'm a normal conservative like you. You said you were 18. I like these people. And the first thing I hear Nick Fuentes say is, Dave, they're not going to think that you're a good person.
This is concern trolling. I'm sorry. No, but this is tone policing, and this is concern trolling.
It's not. It
is
not
absolutely.
Tone policing. Hold up. Let's back it up because I'm going to let you speak. It is not tone policing. What I am saying is that you just went through the fact that you genuinely were coming up, that you were a conservative, you genuinely liked Ben Shapiro, you genuinely thought these things. So that wasn't you would not look back on yourself and say, well, that I was problematic. You just would be like, that makes sense.
Right.
And I'm saying to you that the majority of people have that perspective. You don't have to assign an evil motive. You get into something because you believe it. That's it. It's just that simple.
Okay.
And if you're then going to have somebody who's condemning them, what are we learning? If you're just going to say you're this, you're that, it's like you've forgotten yourself. Like some people just aren't there wherever you are.
Okay, but I missed the part where I condemned him. And I talked about the Dave Smith part repeatedly. And by the way, you're mixing it up and saying, well, you know, if people watch a show, what are they going to think if they see that clip?
I'm just trying to say to you, why would someone maybe say,
can I talk? Can I answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Come on.
Go ahead.
I mean, so, you know, look, I'm a funny guy. I'm bombastic. I'm provocative. That's part of it. And you know what? You can concern, troll, and tone police about, you know, whether
I wouldn't have you on if I'm tone policing and playing
Dave
at clips.
Smith Jew this. We're laughing during the clip.
Yeah,
you and I are laughing.
funny.
It's funny. And
I'm
that's
laughing at you making fun of me. I don't mind you making fun of me.
Yeah, and I don't mind
chill.
you making fun of me if you've ever done that. I mean, and I'm chill too.
No, I don't care. I'm not, like I said, I told you. It's funny.
I like that about you because I think that you're hardcore. I think we're kind of similar in that way. We don't have thin skin. So I appreciate that about you. And I know that Dave Smith is the same way. And I said on that show and other shows, I like him. I think he's a good guy. And I agree with you. I think he's sincere and I respect him. And I think he's a good person, actually.
He is.
But I do think that we disagree. In 2016, you had this alt-right movement, and suddenly you had all these other people that were in the conversation. Like I said, these guys like Jared Taylor and Sam Francis and a whole other crew. And so I really was open-minded and questioning what I really believe. And so that's really when I came into conflict with this establishment, you know, something that I sort of began to figure it out and started to pay the price for this line of inquiry. And so that first conversation I had with Cassie Dillon, it prefigured kind of like my entire adult life until this point. And at that time, in the early months of the Trump admin, I was doing some digging on the Israel situation. And there were some notable news stories with Obama and then with Trump that made me ask some questions. You know, in December of 2016, during the lame duck, Obama declined to veto in the Security Council a resolution condemning the settlements in the West Bank. And everybody called him a Jew hater for doing that. They said he was an anti-Semite. And I said, well, wait a second. And I was a big conservative. I didn't like Obama. But I said, wait a second. I said, it is the official policy of the United States since 1967 that we're against the civilian settlements. Every president, Republican and Democrat. I said, and all Obama did, he didn't even vote no. He didn't veto it. He didn't vote in favor. They voted present, and they allowed the resolution to pass. I said, that's consistent with our government's policy, the American policy. Obviously, Israel and America don't have the same policy on everything. I said, but now you have Fox News and Mark Levin and all the usual suspects are saying he's an anti-Semite and a Jew hater because he merely advanced our own position. I said, isn't that a bit of a double standard? Isn't that hypocritical? I said, and you know what it sounds like? It sounds like the left. You disagree with the left on race, and they say you're a racist. You disagree with the left on Islam, you're an Islamophobe, and all the rest of it. And so that was something that really set off an alarm bell. I said, something's not right here. And I wrote a big article about it on my blog. A couple months later, guess who comes to town for Trump's first visit from a foreign leader? It's Bibi Netanyahu. That was the first foreign leader that he hosted at the White House. And Netanyahu goes up there. They do a joint press conference. And Trump turns to him and says, I need you to take it easy on those civilian settlements in the West Bank because it's a big liability for us. Netanyahu goes home and authorizes the largest expansion of the settlements in Israel's history.
Wait, that's super interesting. Is that on camera?
Yes. Because I was really big into foreign affairs. I was a big...
Also, if you appreciate this interview, again, like I said, it's really hard for you to find the full interview like this. I chose the most important moments from that interview. You can't even find it now. The interview I got this from, it got removed off of YouTube. So if you enjoyed these moments, make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel. Honestly, I don't even know if this video is going to stay here for too long. I hope it does. If you're watching this, then you're one of the few. Make sure you like it. Now let's continue.
Big model UN kid in high school. That was like my thing. So I was really focused on all that. And I just pay attention. I ask questions. I noticed the patterns, so to speak. And so at that point, I became friends with all the Daily Wire people. There was Cassie Dillon, this writer named Elliot Hamilton, a writer named Aaron Bandler. Those guys were Jewish, and I think they had visited Israel a lot. They were involved in Jewish groups. I thought they were my friends, and they were talking about, they were setting me up with a writing gig at Daily Wire. They basically did like a preliminary interview. They wanted me to work over there.
Bro, him on Daily Wire would be insane. He wouldn't last a week.
And I did a lot of collaborations with them. I gave them interviews for articles because I was like a campus team that was pro-Trump and all that. It was big fodder at that time for the culture war stuff. And then I started asking them. I said, why does the United States give Israel $3.8 billion per year? Because at that point, the new MOU had just passed, the new Memorandum of Understanding. That's the foreign aid for Israel. And they actually increased it. And they expanded it for 10 years. So I said, why are they the number one recipient of foreign aid? I said, they're not a poor country. And I don't even really know what the strategic value is there. I said, so why, since 1978, uninterrupted, have they been number one? And number two and number three, it's the same story. It's Egypt and Jordan. They're the second and third biggest recipients. And we basically pay them because they normalized relations with Israel. It's like a bribe. I said, so, what do you make of this whole arrangement? I said, is it because they are our closest ally and I'm missing something? I said, or are we being lobbied? And there's this deep contradiction and double standard, and it's obviously being enforced by foreign influence and money. And I remember they hated the line of questioning.
And when you say they, you're referring to this friend group?
Yes,
okay.
This Daily Wire friend group. They were all writers there, and you could still find their articles online. And they, at first it was sort of playful. They said, oh, haha, very good. They almost thought I was joking. They said, oh, it's very funny, but you really shouldn't ask that, they would say. They'd say, there's a good answer for all those questions. They'd say, but the way you're asking it is anti-Semitic, they said. And we're happy to talk with you one-on-one in person, like they're going to teach me how to ask the question. They said, because the way you're saying it, it sounds hateful and it's wrong. And I said, I'm asking a question. It's free marketplace of ideas, I thought. So I kept pushing and pushing, and I was tugging on a lot of these different threads. I was also asking about World War II and about some of the narratives there. And I was asking about 9/11 and the Iraq War.
And where are you asking this? Are you in a group chat? Are you just face-to-face, like with your friends eating a burger? Like where, when you say I keep asking these questions, what's the setup for that?
We're texting in group chats, and we're even doing it one-on-one. One of the venues, we had a big Christmas party out in Western Massachusetts. And Cassie Dillon invites me back to her apartment with a couple of friends, and everyone's drinking wine. I don't drink, so I wasn't drinking, but we're playing apples to apples, and it's a party atmosphere. We're friends, we're having fun, we're political, we're talking about it, and this is the venue. And it just got increasingly cold over time, and eventually it turned into stop. Like, you need to stop asking or else. And eventually, I kept pushing on a lot of these different things, and Cassie hits me up on Twitter, and she texts me this huge block text paragraph, and she says, we're not in the same movement anymore. She goes, I don't really recognize what you're about and your views. She says, I'm pro-Israel. She goes, and the things you're asking, the things you're saying about Ben Shapiro and other people, she goes, I'm just not a part of that movement. And she said, so we can't be friends anymore.
Obviously, she was looking after her career. Ben Shapiro was, I believe, is the founder of Daily Wire. He's not the CEO, but he's the founder. And if you're going to be saying things about the founder, is that really the wisest move for someone who wants to get a job there? I don't know.
So she stops talking to me, cuts me off completely. All the other people block me. Elliot, Aaron, there were some other people involved. They all block me on Twitter, complete ghosting. And I'm shocked. I'm floored. This is my first encounter with this kind.
Were you really that shocked, Nick? Look, you're trash talking the founder of the company where all these employees are working in, and you want to be employed there. Are you really that shocked?
And a pushback, because you go into it as an 18-year-old in college and you get involved in these groups. I was involved in the Trump campaign, YAL, all these groups. And you think this is the free marketplace. We're here to debate ideas. It's a free speech atmosphere. And I'm also thinking we're all pro-Trump. And that's another big dimension of this is me. Trump was a huge influence on me. He made me a nationalist when I was a conservative. And America first was that operative phrase. I wasn't any longer a small government, constitutional individualist. I said, I'm America first. I'm about America. And so there's this deep contradiction on the Trump strain in particular and what they're pushing. And I said, it really shouldn't be there. If we're America first on China, Mexico, Russia, everybody else, NATO, why aren't we America first on Israel? So This was deeply disconcerting and weird and disturbing to me. And I was honestly just taken aback. I was like, why are my friends now turning their back on me because of things I've been getting into on my show for the past few years. The deception is so much more convoluted and nuanced and subtle and ubiquitous than even people think. A lot of people think, and, not to kind of leap right into the topic, but people have a vague notion Israel has too much influence over our government. That's really just the tip of the iceberg, because then you get into some of these people that have coalesced around Trump in the past couple of years after October 7th. And it's like there's an obvious reason why there's elements in the right. There's almost this form of camouflage they'll do. And one day they're limited government, another day they're white nationalists. Guys like Stephen Miller, who will present as very racialist and very nationalistic, very conservative.
Can someone describe to me the difference between a racist and a racialist?
But yet still extremely loyal to Israel. And you start to say it's not just that Israel influences the government. It's not just there's some vague thing going on. There is this pervasive penetration of our society by a fifth column. And it's so sophisticated and multidimensional and spans many disciplines. It's such a huge topic that you almost have to be a little bit insane to tackle it and to get to the bottom of it, which is sort of me going through the looking glass over the past 8 years. So, and I definitely lean more towards the latter, which is it really is a core part of who we are. Our culture, our heritage, our ancestors, our customs, all of it. It's not that I don't think that two people can fall in love from different races. Of course they can. And they have throughout history. And the races have mixed throughout history and assimilated. But for someone like myself, I always say on my show, it's just my value. I want to marry someone that looks like me, that comes from a similar background, because I want my kids to look like me. I want my grandkids to look like me.
But sorry, I just want to make sure, did you say I'm a racialist or I'm a racist?
For a long time, I would say I'm racialist. Mm-hmm. Now I just say I'm racist.
Okay.
What the hell is this, man? Okay, sorry. That's my question. I'm kind of curious to see what he says. Like, what the heck is the difference?
So when you say you're racist, mm-hmm. because these definitions get changed around, mm-hmm. racist, anti-Semitism gets expanded. What do you mean when you say I'm a racist? Because I think most people watching this would go, if you are a racist right. in the traditional sense of the term, why are you on this podcast, right? Wouldn't you just go, you know what, Candace is black and therefore I don't want to speak to her.
Right.
Certainly not going onto your show and saying, why won't Candace have me on? That doesn't really seem to line up with right. the traditional sense of the idea of racist. So
yeah, and I'm using it. I'm being a little tongue in cheek. I mean, for the purpose of understanding, I'd say my views are I'm a racialist. But I do think that we need to deconstruct this idea of racism in the sense that, look, you're black, I'm white. It is what it is. For my entire life, people have been walking around on eggshells about the subject of race, about white people being racist. Can I say this? Can I say that? Can I have this opinion? And me, I'm sort of, Gavin McInnes said it like this. He said, you're kind of post-racist. You're sort of after this craze where everything was racist. It's sort of this recognition that we live in a heavily racial world. And, look, sometimes we have racist feelings. Racist feelings like, I want to live in a white neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to live in a black neighborhood. If they were all like you, obviously it'd be a different story. But when we think of a black neighborhood, we know what that means and why the property value is cheap.
But that's Black American. So this is why I want to understand this idea better because, and this is kind of something my cousin has said, mm-hmm. which I guess you could say is a racist statement, but she says that white people in America are the white trash of white people in the world, meaning that like there's a special category of uniquely that you don't see when you're dealing with like white Americans here, that if you went across to like Switzerland, you wouldn't see this version of a white person necessarily, or you maybe went to the continent of Africa, you don't see this version of a black person either. Like even if you went to the tribes out in Africa that still exist, they would be a far cry from a black American living in a neighborhood in Compton, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to understand if you think that it's all black people are like this, or if your world is kind of colored by this is what's going on in America. This has failed for 1,000 reasons. Welfarism has definitely, black people in 1940s stand up. My grandfather, mm-hmm. I talk about that denigration and the corrosion of culture. Yeah. That's happening. White, black, whatever you want to name it, there is this intentional corrosion of culture. So do you think it's literally, well, this is just what a black person is when they come out? Or do you think that post welfare, LBJ, great society, this is what Black Americans have become. And I have a right to respond to that and say that as a white man, I don't want to live there.
Well, I think it's more nature than people would like to believe. There's this classic tension of, is it nature, is it nurture, is it cultural, or is it intrinsic, is it racial? And I've always been on the latter side of this among conservatives. Conservatives like to say it's all culture. Black America is the way it is because of hip hop music and the Great Society and that kind of stuff. And I think the uncomfortable reality is a big part of it is intrinsic. One of the big arguments
Yikes, this guy is getting a little out of pocket for me, man.
against the abolition of slavery
Yeah, YouTube definitely banning this. YouTube definitely banning this.
in the 1860s is that, when Europeans colonized Africa, they hadn't discovered the wheel. There's no two-story buildings. There's no writing. There's no written language. Missionaries had to go to Africa in the last century and invent it for the African people because there's no recorded history. They didn't have writing.
So Egypt is not in Africa.
Well, Egypt is a different race. The Egyptians were not black.
Okay, but you said when they went to Africa, so I just want to...
The interior of Africa in the late 19th century, scramble for Africa.
So we're now knocking Egypt out of Africa.
Well, Egypt is part of northern Africa, sub-Saharan Africa.
You said Africa, so I'm not trying to get a gotcha. I'm just responding. You're saying Africa.
Sure. Yeah.
It's in Africa. It's Egypt. It's kind of ridiculous to say there was no written language. Well, so I'm just trying to get you to
sure. Egyptians are not Africans.
If I'm not pushing back, the internet will. So
Egyptians are not racial Africans. When I say African, I'm saying sub-Saharan Africans.
Sub-Saharan, okay.
Black people because it is a different race. In sub-Saharan Africa, and Europeans did not penetrate that until late 19th century. They didn't have any of this. To the extent that you have infrastructure in Africa, it's from the Muslims in the Sahel and the Maghreb in northern Africa, where the Arabs colonized. And then you had, Carthage and Egypt. You had ancient civilizations. But sub-Saharan Africa, they didn't have that. You take these people out of that land and put them here, and they're enslaved people. You let them free in a modern, liberal republic. They're not going to succeed. It's not going to go well for them. And that was one of the arguments against abolition. People said if you free them without any assimilation, without any kind of process for them to be acclimated, they're going to die. And that's exactly what happened. Many of the bottom 10% of the lowest IQ Africans just died off for generations. And it had pardon the expression, but it had a eugenic effect because over time, if the weakest are dying off, that's one argument for why blacks in America have a standard deviation higher IQ than the blacks in sub-Saharan Africa. So, so I do believe there is something intrinsic going on.
How would you even measure the IQ in sub-Saharan Africa? This is just a little wild right now.
On there. And what makes people uncomfortable about this is the idea that it's unchangeable. There's something about, and this is why I'm a Catholic, we do have an inherent desire for universalism. We do believe that there's a common humanity and a common human community and all of that.
So what does he think about Black Catholics?
We hate the idea that we're born a certain way and we can never change. And that's just the way it is. And we even think about this in terms of, it's become not so popular these days to tell children, you can be whatever you want to be. Because we know that's not the case. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people are smart, some dumb, some ugly, some handsome. That's why, by the way, incel-dumb is a big part of this also.
So you believe these are immutable characteristics that are assigned at birth?
I think that, yes.
For the most part.
Things like race, all those attributes are immutable and unchangeable. But
they have changed. Just factually speaking, they have changed.
They change over time, over the generations.
Okay, so then you don't think it's immutable because if this was an immutable
individual person.
Okay, so you're saying that if you are born at this space and time as a Black person in America, here is the cards that you're dealt with, and you can't change that over time.
Something like IQ does not change. Doesn't change wildly. It only changes genetically over. IQ is a big one, and that changes. That's a genetic trait, and so that can change over the generations, but not. You can't take an individual that's 75 IQ, which is the average in West Africa, and take them to 100.
So two dumb people can't produce a smart person.
I believe they can, actually.
Yeah.
But it would be a mutation. And I'll be honest, for this one, I hate to say it, but I do kind of agree with Nick Fuentes. People don't like to address that, but IQ generally, 80 to 90% of it is genetic.
But
So does that kind of debunk your?
no, because it's rare that that happens. But IQ is a heritable trait, so it's unlikely that that happens.
Okay.
And do you not recognize that there's group differences in IQ? Or?
I think that there's group differences, but
Okay.
I wouldn't say, and the reason why I'm pushing back on this is because those perspectives that you hold, Thomas Sowell did a really good job debunking that.
Mm.
And I think the book is called Intellectuals and Race, and he opens up and makes a very sound argument that these characteristics are not immutable, and that it can be your environment. And he kind of goes back and discusses, like, who had the highest IQ and who now has the highest IQ. And so I just disagree with you fundamentally. So the question is, are we allowing, because I'm like, Africa is a pretty rich country. Like, why aren't Africans controlling the diamond trade? Who's taking all of the diamonds so that they can't control the diamond trade? And how long have these people been doing that, being essentially culture vultures? That's kind of the journey that I've been on now, in terms of really trying to go back and look into history to see what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I never trust myself when I have a perspective now, because I realize how much of my opinions and beliefs were shaped by the public school system.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think you're right. I think that there has been a very sophisticated effort to, just like you would say now, in terms of people that are intentionally attacking Anglo-Saxons. I'm just learning about that there were these books that were written we must genocide the Anglo-Saxons, that were going on for a lot longer than I realized. History didn't begin with World War II. But I think it would take a lot of time to kind of unpack that.
Yeah.
Like, are we stopping people from getting ahead just because, I don't know?
That just sounds, I mean, being honest with you, that just sounds to me like a left-wing argument when they say, why don't these countries get ahead? Colonialism, you're a colonizer. It's like, okay, but when we got there, they had no development. When we got to Africa, they had no technological development.
So you think that
history.
Even if we weren't at war, and sure, you could say that you think that's a leftist argument. I would only push back on that because I've learned so much about just like recent history that I didn't know. But you think that the Middle East, like, if we had done nothing in terms of the Middle East, that they would just be savages and just be like, America didn't do anything it doesn't set anything backwards, and you're just like bombing a place.
Yeah, kind of. I think that.
Whoa, buddy. So the Muslim world, the Eastern world, was way further advanced, actually. And you know what? The way he's talking about how when the British Empire went to Africa, there was nothing there. When the Muslim Empire was in its heyday, the European civilizations were nothing. They were like savages almost, right? And hey, they developed a civilization, just saying. And yeah, war definitely did destroy a lot of the Muslim world, for sure. That's stupid for him to say.
We did set them back because when they don't have political order, it prevents development and investment and things like that. But, again, when you look at the antecedents of all these, the history didn't start, like you said, with World War II in the 20th century. There's a reason that European civilization created this enormous gap between them and everybody else. And I don't think it was that it was white supremacy or it was unfair or something like that.
Well, there was a time when there was a huge gap between the Muslim world and the European civilization.
I think it's because Europeans are smarter. I think.
Okay. Well, empires come and go, buddy.
I think that on average, Europeans.
So to use your argument against you, that could be said about Ashkenazis. So if you're sitting here saying, I believe in some conspiracy and that it's a coordinated effort and blah, 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 they could look at you and say, that's a leftist argument. We're just smarter.
I think they are smart.
They are smart. Smarter, the smartest.
Well, I would say this. I would say they're probably as smart as the smartest white race, but the difference between the Jews and the white people is that they work as a team. And so if you look at, for example, things like transportation, white people invented every mode of transportation, railroad, cars, airplanes, all of it. When you look at fields of knowledge, white people invented all that, chemistry, anthropology.
That's not true. I mean, literally, the Middle East, the Muslim world invented advanced math, medicine, all of these things. I don't know what he's talking about. Yeah, it became further in the European civilization, but we literally invented these sciences, astronomy. Like, come on.
All that stuff. So white people really did give birth to the modern world in a major way. Jewish people are high verbal IQ because they're lawyers, they're rabbis. That's what a rabbi is a lawyer. That's what the Talmud is. It's a lawyerly back and forth. And so they're skilled at some things, and you're not wrong. They're extremely educated. They're extremely intelligent. They're a unique case where, 2% of the population overrepresented 2,000%. Are they 2,000% smarter? Answer is no. Because if you look at the standardized testing, the top scores in the high school standardized tests are almost all Asians in math and science. Asians aren't overrepresented in power. It's Jewish people. So
if Asians are much smarter, why isn't their civilization taking over the whole world by now?
Jewish people are not, proportionally as more intelligent as they are more overrepresented. And that goes to their real superpower, which is they're an organized minority. An organized minority will be the disorganized majority. As far as Africa is concerned, they didn't have the wheel. We got there, they didn't have the wheel. And it's unfortunate. It's not anything that people are happy about. I don't believe that makes Africans inferior. But I do think that explains their relative level of development that has been persistent over centuries, millennia.